joins in the attack against Paul and Silas, and the magistrates order them to be stripped and beaten. I want to talk about a bad day. That's a bad day. You and I sometimes can think, man, our day's pretty rough. Man, work was really a pain. Man, the boss did not listen to me. He or she just doesn't understand where I'm coming from. My spouse or husband, my wife, they just don't get me. The kids, what are they doing? My parents, man, they just demand way too much of me. Don't they understand I'm a teenage kid? I can't do all that. We think we have bad days. This is a bad day. Being seized, being dragged into the marketplace, having the crowd attack you, stripped down, beaten, flogged, thrown into prison, finding yourself in the inner prison cell and having your feet in stocks. Have any of you had this happen to you? I thought about asking the question, have any of you ever spent time in jail? But I'm not going to ask that because I know there's maybe a few of you that maybe in your life have spent a night or two in jail for various reasons. So maybe you can somehow understand the part about being in jail. But the reality is you weren't in stocks. You weren't stripped down. You weren't beaten. Paul and Silas, they're having a horrible, awful, tremendously bad day. I mean, it's just not a bad hair day. This is totally the day's gone to, I won't say, you know what I'm saying. The day's gone there. In our perspective, remember, what you focus on is what you see. What you see alters how you feel. I don't know about you, but I know that oftentimes when I have a bad day, I tend to focus on what's going on during the day. I mean, I shared last week, Sunday morning, that the week before that was a horrendously awful week for me. And I found myself focusing on me. Oh, man, doesn't life really sometimes suck? Oh, man, I got this issue that's going on. I got this issue that's going on. I got this pressure going on. I got this going on. I got this going on. And it's like the more I think about me, the more I stay in the weeds. You ever have that? You know you're having a bad day. Not nearly as bad as Paul and Silas, but you're having a bad day. And when we start to just think about how bad it is for us, we stay in that cesspool. But Paul and Silas have something here to teach us. They have something that we can learn about. The reality is, we can learn to zoom out. Learn to see the bigger picture. I know that I've shared this before, but 12 years ago when I did some time over in Saudi Arabia, right after 9/11 was there deployed, Saudi Arabia at an air base. On the way home, I looked out the airplane window and I saw this itty-bitty little piece of land with the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee, and this itty little bitty piece of land out the window, and I thought to myself, and the Jews and the Muslims are fighting over that land. Are we crazy? I had that perspective because we were 40,000 feet up in the air. Out of the weeds, out of the quagmire, out of the cesspool of what's going on, and getting a bigger view, an overview, getting above it all and looking down. Paul and Silas here have something that they can teach me. They have something here that they can teach you. And again, I think all of us sometimes find ourselves in the bad day. I think all of us at times find ourselves maybe not stuck in, very few of us stuck in a jail. But don't we put ourselves in our own jail? Maybe it's the jail of the way we see things within life. Maybe it's the jail of how we feel like other people are getting ahead and we're not. Maybe it's the jail that we struggle with within our relationships with marriage or kids or parents. Maybe it's the jail that we question, God, okay, how come somebody else is blessed and I've been trying to serve you and I just can't get ahead financially? You know, we don't find ourselves in that physical jail. But how often don't we put ourselves in the emotional or the spiritual jail ourselves? Well, Paul and Silas, as I say, have something to teach us here. They're in jail. Bad hair day. Awful day for them. But what do they do? About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying. They were praying. They were singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor from World War II, and maybe some of you have read his works before. The biggest thing that I get out of Viktor Frankl is simply this. He talks about the fact that everything was taken away from them as being prisoners in World War II. They were stripped of their clothes, they were stripped of their pictures, they were stripped of their personal belongings. They took away their names, and they gave them numbers. Viktor Frankl's number was 119,104. That was his number. That's how he was known by. But he said everything was taken away except one thing. His words, everything can be taken away from a man but one thing. The last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Just let that sink in for a second. Viktor Frankl, who is in a prison camp, like Paul and Silas in jail, lost everything. We all know there were 12 million people that were killed, Jewish and other people that were killed in the prison camps. Viktor Frankl says, the one thing that nobody can take away from you or I, or from them that were in jail, is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. You and I have the ability to choose our attitude of how we will be with each other. You and I have our ability to choose our attitude of how we will be with God. You and I have the ability to choose. Isn't that amazing? I mean, of all the natural world that God has created, the animal world, humanity is the only one that has the ability to choose. We choose whether we're going to stay in the weeds, whether we're going to see life in a negative context, or if we're going to get above it. If we're going to see more of the blessings that God has given to us. So what are Paul and Silas here doing? Midnight, they were praying. They were praying. They were offering up their circumstances to God, and I think they were even doing more than that. There's something about prayer. Something about prayer which I think we get a little confused on. Too often, and maybe you fit this, I know I used to fit this, sometimes I still do. Too often, our prayer life is all about me. God, bless my day. God, may you give me a good day at work. God, may you blah, 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 blah for me. God, may you blah, 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 blah for me. God, may you be with my family. God, you see what I'm saying? Our prayer life too often gets focused on ourself or our immediate family, which still deals with ourself. And don't get me wrong, it's important to pray for yourself. It's important to pray for your family. But just try this once. When you find yourself putting yourself in a jail emotionally, spiritually, and sort of locking yourself up, and you turn to God and say, God, help me get through this, and you start to lift all that up to God, take a step out of that and say, Lord, be with Mary.